Hello viewers, wherever you're watching us from, welcome to another edition of your weekly State of Affairs program here on QTV. This is your political program where we discuss issues affecting people and the country. And like we do every week, today we're looking at a very critical issue, which is the issue of poverty. We know we are in a country where many live in abject poverty. And then because of that, we have seen many people living from hand to mouth. And then today we are here to discuss about how has this thing affected national development, and what is the role of government, and not only government but even the political parties who are government in waiting. What are their policies and programs as far as addressing the issue of poverty in the country is concerned? As usual, I'm joined in the studio by my co-host Sidi Cisse. Sidi, welcome once again.
Thank you very much, Aliu.
Thank you very much. Well, tonight our guest Alaji Mbow, National Treasurer and also National Assembly Member of Upper Salem of the NRP. Alaji, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Aliu, for having me on the show.
Also in the studio is another Alaji Mbayo, spokesperson of the Gambia Action Party. Mr. Bayo, welcome to the State of Affairs program.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you so much. I will just start with both of you by asking you, I mean, we know when it comes to the issue of addressing poverty in the country, government has a very key role to play. I would just ask this question to both of you. What should be the role of government in alleviating poverty in the country? Mr. Honorable Mbow, I'll start with you.
Thank you very much, Aliu, for having me on this show. And then thank you also your co-host, Mr. Cisse, and my colleague, Sim Alaji, for being here today. I think when you talk about poverty in any country, I think the government of the day actually has a central pillar in ensuring that that's actually tackled. Now, as a government, or in any government, I think they have a responsibility in terms of their people that they govern. Because when people give you a mandate, there is certain thing that they expect from you. One is about their security. Another one is about their well-being, and etc., education, health, you name it. So when you talk about poverty in this country, for example, the government actually takes a key stage in ensuring that those poverty are alleviated. And then when you go to the SDGs, for example, the number one, no poverty, I think the government actually plays a critical role to ensure that poverty is driven out of the source of this country. So I think personally, the government must be at the forefront in all aspects of poverty reduction or poverty alleviation in this country. They should be at the forefront.
Mr. Bayo?
Yeah, thank you
for the role of government in alleviating poverty.
Thank you so much for having me in the platform, and your co-host, Mr. Cisse, and also the Treasurer and Honorable from the National Assembly representing NRP. Thank you for having me in the show. When we talk about poverty, entirely it's a role of government. And I think one of the reasons why political parties are formed, it is to shape society. And if we are there to shape societies as political parties, we're supposed to stand and represent the people entirely. Their well-being is one of the focus of government endeavors. Poverty alleviation is something that government have to have a strategy on. It's one of the apex decision-making issues that government should look at. We've seen so many issues, dilute idealism, that are put in terms of policies that are not actually addressing the need to alleviate poverty. The strategies that government should put should be vigorous, should be very determining to ensure that we have a state of affairs that actually talks or deal with poverty entirely. Because any nation that is subjected to poverty or abject poverty, you don't see development. You don't see meaningful development. And people expect you to represent them at that apex level to ensure that their problems, their well-being are well addressed. But this is the opposite. This is the opposite. And that is why there is a need for an active opposition to come up, to be able to identify some of those issues. Those strategies that government is supposed to put in place, so that if the government, the central government cannot see that as a tool, the opposition can highlight it, and government can copy from the opposition, so that we can have a very established programs that can alleviate poverty in our country.
Honorable Mbow, do you agree with him that the government is not living up to its mandate in terms of alleviating poverty in the country?
Well, you know, like I believe, you know, every person you have a right to an opinion. So, and I do respect those things. But then, if you go to in reality, you know, we have the Sustainable Development Goals, and there are indicators that actually are actually looked at, that are actually reviewed worldwide, including our own country. When you review the SDG goal, especially goal number 1, which is no poverty, you realize that actually at this point in time, Africa actually is not doing very well. Gambia in particular is not doing very well. But it doesn't mean that we are actually stagnant, nothing actually being done. If you look at the evaluation that was made in 2020, you realize that Gambia actually has 55.3%. And the best in Africa is Tunisia, which has about 67%. Now, the indications, or all the indicators that actually they've measured, you realize that actually what it shows is there are still issues, major issues in this country of the Gambia, but they are heading in the right direction. Basically, that's exactly what the report is actually telling us. And the report actually has looked at 117 different indicators dealing with various SDGs. But in this particular one, they're saying that Gambia is 55.3%, which means Gambia is moving in the right direction, as opposed to other countries that actually have been stagnant, others that are actually going down. So I wouldn't agree with him on that, that nothing is working. Something's actually working, but it may be very slow. But I think we are moving in the right direction.
Yes, Mr. Bayo, I mean, it appears you are not in full support of what the government is doing as far as alleviating poverty is concerned. Your party, the Gambia Action Party, is a government in waiting. How will you approach the fight against poverty, differing from, you know, how the previous governments and the current government is approaching fighting poverty in the country?
Okay, I just want to reflect on the submissions that he made, that the government, it's not stagnant. We are making progress. But it's not reflected. What is the eminent need for you to be making progress while the people in the country doesn't realize it? At least if we are making progress at now, we should be able to have that indicator in our government system that we are moving in a certain direction.
How do you know that it's not reflecting?
It's not reflecting. I mean the society.
How do you know?
How do I know is the manner in which things are put. If you look at the economy in totality, what can we say? If you look at the basic income for a Gambian, or let's say a normal Gambian in the Gambia here, it's not up to standard. We look at the prices of inflation of prices in markets. So these are all things that are paying dividend. If actually the country is moving towards a particular direction, we should have notified, which would not be notified by the system.
But someone will argue the economy has been doing well until the advent of the COVID-19.
Well, COVID-19 is a universal thing. It's not only affecting the Gambia, so we don't have no excuses on that.
But coming back to the main question, how will your party, your Gambia Action Party, approach fighting poverty if you become the government?
Well, we have programs and policies, and we are going by our programs and policies. And addressing abject poverty in the Gambia, it's a concern of the Gambia Action Party programs and policy. In fact, what we're going to do is very simple. It's just to diversify the economy. Because we've seen...
How will you do that?
Because we've seen the economy the way it is running. In fact, we are using a principle-based IMF economy. And if you look at the IMF economy largely, the indicators that they have that diversify the economy, for us it will not work well for us. Because it's going to be an economy that is dependent, but not independent. We need an economy that can be diversified based on the principle of independency. So first of all, we are not going to encourage the idealism of working with the IMF economy.
But you know, some of these things are easily said than done. In terms of action, what action will you take?
That's what I'm saying. We are going to diversify the economy. The economy is the host of everything. When you talk about poverty, if the economy is not doing well, then poverty is going to threaten us. So, like when we diversify the economy, like building partnership with foreign investors based on, policies that can benefit them and can benefit us, not only them, and then also looking at the agricultural system. Because today, if the Gambia can address the agricultural system adequately, nobody will be here talking about poverty, because it's a stakeholder in the strategy to alleviate poverty. So we are going to ensure that we invest immensely into the agricultural sector. In fact, I just want to bring to your notice that I could not even believe this as a responsible government, giving donkeys to farmers. These are archaic idealism. People have moved away from this. Tell me how many hectares a donkey can farm in an hour.
Well, Mr. Mo, what's going to be a response to that?
Well,
and then CC will come in later, because I know he's also keeping up.
Thank you very much, Aliu. I think we need to put things in perspective. When you talk about poverty, especially in this country, the Gambia, we must look at things in perspective. Where exactly are the people we're talking about that are poor? Where are they exactly? We need to, and that's the reason why I keep saying that we must invest in data, especially GBOS. That could actually give us enough data for able to make informed decisions. Without that, we'll just be speculating. And I think it's very clear that's what he's saying. Basically, it's just speculation, that nothing else has worked. Now, what happened is, you look at the entire country. For example, where are the poor people? Where are they? Traditionally, they will look at, well, is the urban area that are doing better than the rural areas. That's what they're saying. The urban is actually doing better. And that's the reason why you have rural-urban migration. People moving from the rural areas to the urban area because of they can get jobs here, at least to be able to sustain their families, stuff like that. Now, what is actually happening then to the rural areas? Then you go back to what's actually happening is agriculture. But the agriculture we depend on is rain-fed agriculture, meaning that the farmers, they work 4 months in the whole year, and the rest of the 8 months, they don't do anything. Now, to be able to change that, it doesn't actually only need government intervention, but government intervention should be at the forefront. You see, what is happening is, Aliu, for quite a long time, I think government actually has brought in policies. We have the PAJEP one, program for accelerated development. We already had also one called the agricultural policies that meant to change the way agriculture was done. Then we also had Vision 2020. Aliu, you can see that all these policies, all these visions actually is not actually working. As a party, as NRP, when we take into what we're going to do is to actually thoroughly look at really where are we going wrong. Because doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to get the same results, that's what we call madness. And NRP is going to go back to the people to find out exactly what we can do to make a difference. You cannot sit in Banjul and create policies without actually involving people. For us, is people will be at the center. We're going to engage people for them to understand really what they can do as a population or what they can do as a country to be able to change the way we do. And agriculture will be at the forefront, but we're going to invest in people. And not only that, we go into the farming, but we're also going to export knowledge. We're going to export experts to other parts of the world. That actually
earlier on, you said the government is doing well.
Yes, I'm saying they not like extremely doing well. I'm just saying they're doing something. It's not like they're stagnant. You see, you have some countries that are going down, you have some countries that are stagnant, and you have countries that are moving slowly. I'm saying Gambia is actually moving slowly. We are not stagnant.
Okay, we'll put a stop.
Okay, that's fine, yes.
Exactly.
You can come.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aliu, and beautiful questions for the two. When you talk about poverty in the Gambia, the Gambian context, we looked at the population of the Gambia, and we have seen women. We all know the population of women, and you cannot alleviate poverty without not bringing women in the forefront. And we know what the women do. Mostly, is you have a lot of women producers in this country. What would your government do to help the women producers in terms of what they're doing? Because empowering them, giving them the resources that they need, would alleviate poverty in those communities. But we have seen the schemes of loans, in and out, and they have been very unsuccessful. What will a GAP government do, and what will an NRP government do in terms of helping the women producers? All the produce that have been, going to the markets in this country are women who are doing it, but they are realizing very little, and they get into loan schemes that have not been successful for the last 30 years.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cisse. The Gambia Action Party has a policy put in place already for the aspect you're talking about. It's a perspective that actually the Gambia Action Party is looking at keenly, women's role in terms of alleviating poverty. What you said is true. If we leave the women behind, it will not pay dividend. So as a result, we understand this as a responsible government in the waiting. We are going to ensure that the loan schemes you are talking about can be revitalized.
But they've not worked. What will your government do to make it work?
I'm coming up. I'm coming up with the actual policy that I'm trying to put in place. Anywhere in the world, there's no way you can invest. There's no way you can try to move along in terms of trade or in terms of making money with an interest rate of 35% or 30%. You cannot make it. And this is what we've seen, rolling around us. So it is a need for Gambia Action Party to come up with a scheme whereas we can have investment banks. In fact, the banks that we are having here, those are banks that don't even seek the interests of our people. Let us have investment bank, Gambia Investment Bank, Agricultural Investment Bank. Those investment banks actually describe us or define us as a people, where a Gambian can go and have a loan of a zero, percentage rate, 0% rate. Go and have your farms, invest in your farms, sell your produce.
Where are you going to sell your produce? This is the issue.
I am coming. Yeah. I am coming. In the state, in our state, let's say in our state policy, we are going to ensure that the farming sector, we create the market for it. We create market for the farming sector. When you create market for the farming sector, how are you
going to create that market?
You create the market like establishing the infrastructure. You establish the infrastructure for local market.
What sort of infrastructure? What sort of infrastructure? Say for example, a garden in Sukuta, they do what we call tomato vegetable gardening. What sort of market? What added value are you going to put on their produce?
What I'm saying here is the infrastructure will entail factories, the human resource base, to empower the human resource base on those areas, so that if you have your produce, having it from the farm, it will be just easier for you just to take it to somebody who can buy it.
Who are going to own these factories?
These factories are going to be owned by Gambians. We are going to empower Gambians. I'm talking about Gambians in totality here. I'm not talking about somebody else. I'm talking about Gambians. Gambians are going to own these infrastructures, whereas they can work there, buy this produce, add more value into the produce that we are having. If you look at the produce that we have in the Gambia here, we can add value on them instead of exporting them off, instead of taking them somewhere else without having the dividend goal for it. So if we add value into them, you can see that there will be an increment of whatever.
Can you take one example of one produce and tell me what you're going to do with it, and then tell me the added value that is going to come out?
Let's say groundnut.
Okay.
Let's say groundnut. Farmers in the Gambia everybody can farm groundnut. And let's forget about the state farms for now, because I want to talk about the state farms too. But before going to the state farms, let's go to about individual farms. If you have a farm as an individual and you happen to farm groundnut,
okay,
the moment you harvest your groundnut, there will be a company that is owned by a Gambian, either by the state or a Gambian, that will support in buying your product. When buying your product, and that company will later add value. How will they add the value? Like groundnut, for example, you can have oil from it. You can have the paste from it, and even the kernel, that's the chaff of it. You can also have another product of it. So all these are products that can actually yield more value into the groundnut, rather than just selling the groundnut, making it paste for people to use it or own consumption. So these are all areas that government can also invest in. Whereas the produce that we have, at the end of the day, we add more value into them, and then from there...
finally, before I move to Honorable Mo to answer that question, what you've just said, is it going to be state-led or is it going to be private sector-led?
That's what I'm saying. We are going to diversify it.
No, yeah, you want to diversify, but you must have a percentage.
That's what I'm telling you. It's not going to be entirely on state. State will determine.
Proportionate it for
individual citizens that are very committed.
How is... I want you to proportionate it.
Well, let's say state can go 60% and the private sector 40%.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cisse. You see, our country, we have a very interesting country, actually, very, very interesting country. Because for the most part, people will think that in terms of employment, everything must be in the hands of the government, which I tend to defy a bit. Because if you look at the most advanced world, employment does not entirely rely on the hands of government. That's where the private sector comes in. So in this particular situation where we can help the women of this country, key thing is access to finance. And I think that's fundamental. If they aren't able to get access to finance, then they will not be able to move from step A to step B. And I think...
We have seen women being having access to finance for the last 30 years, but they've not moved forward.
Because what is happening is the financing of those monies is where the problem is. The interest rates are really very high. The interest rates are high simply because I was in the banking industry as well, and I know the cost of funds that we actually have. Now, what happened is we can encourage more microfinance that would actually be available to the entire women of this country. We can also encourage cooperative societies where people can actually come together and then be able to contribute and then actually have guaranteed among themselves and be able to have lower interest rates. Now, the issue with microfinance we have in this country here, which we've invested in, is also the interest rate, but they actually have started to go down. But or the key issue here is the credit reserve ratio. That is the amount of money that is required by the microfinance institutions to keep at the central bank in terms of risk mitigation. Now, the key here would, as an NRP government, is we're going to have to engage the central bank also to see how best we can reduce this amount, which is the credit reserve ratio, which we understand the risk that's actually involved, so that the cost of funds to this institution will be lessened, and that actually has a direct impact with the interest rate that we actually give to the women folks out there to be able to have lower interest rate and to be able to work together.
So, these microfinance bodies comfortable now with what the central bank is doing? Because in the other way, it is a parasitic microfinance, a parasitic cooperative society, because you are just making money out of the poor women. We are saying that is what has been happening. What will your government do different?
You see, what happened is our government actually, it's not like they have enough funds they're going to put out there so that they can give money. They've started doing something, which is right now, last year, when Parliament actually has approved for this year 100 million, that will be given out to low interest rates to be given to women to assist. That thing, I think we need to redouble our effort. Personally, I think the government of the Gambia must put in the budget every year that would actually help the women folks. This year we have 100 million, and I think this needs to continue until we have a standalone women development bank in this country. That's the only way that we can actually assist the women. Now, when the government gives out those loans and low interest rate, they will also compete with the microfinance institutions. They will also compete with the banks. So what the end effect would be, those institutions will also reduce their loans because of there is an alternate avenue where women can actually get loans from. And I think this avenue where the government is actually putting money out there help those societies, help those clubs or those organizations, women organizations to develop using government-owned funds. I think we need to continue that, and I will support 100% that as an NRP government, I think we're going to put more money in those areas because women are really making a difference in this country. And women and the youth, they are the key, they are the seekers and because of this economy. And
Honorable, you keep mentioning when there's an NRP government. Aren't you in government at the moment?
We are in government, but this is not a full government owned by NRP. We are a party to it, and we have a responsibility, and we are playing our responsibility. But at the end of the day, we as a party, if we as this is an NRP-led government, this is exactly what we are talking about. But as a coalition government, since the inception, I think NRP is playing the part that they're supposed to play, which is also looking at the bigger picture of what we have in this country, but not as an individual party. We're looking at the bigger picture where all the governments can actually see themselves in the economic development.
What will your government do different from what the current government is doing?
Well, you see, we cannot have it our own way because there are certain strategies that we think we can even do it better. But because of the fact that this is not a government that is actually led by NRP, it may be very difficult for us to put our mark or to put our stamp in some of the economic development we have in this country. But that would be reversed when NRP actually is in government, because purely we will be dealing with people directly, and again, we'll be invested in people, we'll be investing in technology. At the same time, we have to ensure that the infrastructure development of this country is up to standard, where it will reduce the rural urban drift. Because again, the only reason why people are coming from the rural areas over here is because they do not have avenues where they can actually make or develop themselves into various aspects in terms of changing their lives.
And all that thing, people argue that it all boils down to what we were talking about, the issue of policy. Yes. Policy being drafted and not implemented as it should be.
Exactly.
Will you agree that all these things, the blame should go to the politicians who are elected, to steer the affairs of this country? It seems the politicians are more about themselves when they get into power.
Exactly. You see, this is where the problem is. When you create policies, the stakeholders must be engaged at every level of those policies. And unless they are involved, unless they have a buy-in, you're going to continue to have problems. And that's one of the issues we have in this country. We sit over here in Banjul, develop what we develop, and then go back to the people. Instead of doing a bottom-up approach, what we need is bottom-up approach. We go back to the people, understand really what they need, understand really how they can come into play, and they will give you ideas where you can actually create some policies, create programs that will help them to move in the next level. Unless and until we do that, we will continue to have policies that will be stagnant, or we continue to have policies that will not move us anywhere. We need to engage the people at the grassroots, get their buy-in, get their ideas, incorporate into this policy and programs, and we can move forward. Otherwise, we will be stagnant, or if we're going to move, it will be moving very slow.
And still on the issue of the poverty, the low wages in the Gambia is so appealing. It's so sad. It's a sad reality that the wages in this country is quite poor. What policy does your party has in terms of bridging that gap?
Thank you. The Gambia Action Party, just I like reiterated again, the policies we have are weak. But addressing the issue of poverty is a concern, because we know our government will not move on to satisfaction if the poverty issue is not addressed. poverty per se, yes, it is very difficult for us to have alleviated totally, but we can have a reduction perspective. Whereas the Gambia Action Party will look at entirely the economy. How are we going to work with the economy to ensure that poverty is reduced adequately?
To what percentage?
If you look at the trajectory, let's say 40 to 45%. 40 to 45% poverty reduction. So if that happens, you can see.
So you have to wait until you're in government to look at the economy. That's baffling, right?
No, we are not waiting to be in government.
So can you, tell us concretely what would you do in terms of the poor wages that you pay?
That's what the poor wages that we are looking at. We are looking at employment first. Let's look at employment first. How many Gambians preview or have the opportunity for employment? You know, and then secondly, we need to use the state resources.
You cannot raise the poor scales now, and you start talking about employment.
And that's why I'm talking about
the poor scales now.
Exactly, because
poor salaries.
The poor salaries.
Yes.
Yeah. If you want to address the poor salaries, you have to augment something.
And what
on
is
the other hand,
what is that?
So if we, that's why I'm coming. I'm like, if you are saying the poor scales in the country as at now, it's not paying dividend to the development that we are having. We are saying as a government, we are going to work on that to ensure that the scales are reduced. Okay, unemployment is one. When you employ people, it will be a sort of a reduction from whatever they earn, you know, as salaries per year or per month. And so we're going to reduce that and increase the employment rate and also increment in the salary.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Bayo. Well, viewers, we remind you that you're watching State of Affairs here on QTV. I'm your host, Aliou Cissé, with my co-host, Sidi Cissé, and our guest tonight, Honorable Alaji Mbow of the National Reconciliation Party and Alaji M. Bayo, spokesman of the Gambia Action Party. We will go with a short commercial break, and when we return, the discussion continues. Hello viewers, welcome back from that short commercial break. Remind you that you're watching State of Affairs here on QTV. I'm your host, Aliou Cissé, and today we're looking at the issue of poverty in the country, knowing the fact that many Gambians actually live below, you know, the international standard, of course, $1 per day. And then our guests tonight are Alaji Mbow of the National Reconciliation Party and Alaji M. Bayo from the Gambia Action Party. Mr. Mbow, just before we went on the break, we were talking about the issue of wages in the country. Do you think the government is doing much to help address this issue?
Well, I think what they're doing is really very, very, very small. Because I think in 2018, when the government came with a 50% increment in the basic salary of the civil servants, my stand at that point was we really need to do a review, comprehensive review, and then try to close the gap between grade 1 to grade 6 or grade 7. Because if you do a mass 50% increment of salaries, what that does mean is the gap that existed will continue to exist. For me, our stand is this. We need to do a comprehensive review of the civil service in terms of salaries structure. That needs to be done, point blank. Secondly, also, the review also would include having to ensure that we employ people that are qualitative, meaning that people that will actually able to do the job. Because if you look at most ministries, department, agencies, you realize that, well, just by looking at it, I don't have any statistics to show, but by looking at it, you may think that they are actually overemployed. So what we're going to see is when you do a proper review, of each of those institutions, you realize that really, do you really need 100 people to work in a particular ministry? Do you really need 200, 300, 400 people to work in a particular department or agency? Then that's where you get the most qualitative people to work there, and the rest, then you take them somewhere else. Now, when that happens, that means the kind of money that you're going to have left behind, you'll be able to augment some of those salaries so that those minimum wages would be actually eradicated. We need to have a minimum wage in this country where people will not be paid below a certain standard. But the government, I understand they're having some difficulties in increasing the wage bill to a very high level simply because they do not have enough funds to be able to do that. One, the state-owned enterprises are not working properly, like they're not really generating revenue for the government, and also government doesn't have any other avenue outside taxes where they actually get money.
Honorable, we have seen the borough government have done what is called the head count in all departments.
Yes.
So when they say we need to go back and look at things, that was basically done. Head count is done.
No, the head count was only to remove the ghost workers.
Okay.
Because the people were being paid and they are not there. So the headcount was very.
So if you have reduced the ghost workers, yes, would that not tell us by now we should increase the wages?
No, the amount is still very small.
The amount is still very small.
Very small, yes.
Will an NRP government have a minimum wage?
Of course, that's exactly what we are saying. An NRP-led government will have a minimum wage where every employee of this country, of this government, of the Gambia, would actually be pegged at a minimum wage, and from there, then start we go up. Now, the question would be, how are you going to do that, or how are you going to support that?
That's what I want to follow.
The first thing you're going to do is you're going to have to do a comprehensive review of the civil service. Do we really need this number of people that are working in the civil service? Do we really
You've already said that. What are the conditions that has to be met for an NRP government to do a minimum wage?
Well, the condition is one, because you need to have a proper study to understand really, if you do a minimum wage, what is the potential wage bill of the government every month or every year? We need to understand that. Once that is put in place, then you look at the people that are working in those institutions, whether you really need them or you really don't need them. Because what happens is, oftentimes you go to a government department or government agency, then the next minute you see them, most of the day they are in the market. That's a fact. We all know. They're in the market. Do they not have anything to do? For the most part, maybe that's what we really need to review. Each employee must be given a TOR that's going to indicate really what you are supposed to do. Sometimes you may have a job that could be done by a job of 3 people.
So let's imagine, finally, say the NRP government is in office, you did all this, and you realize you don't need all these people in this particular department. What are you going to do? Are you going to lay them off?
We're gonna go strictly by what the laws of this country is in terms of labor laws. We have labor laws that govern really when you want to retrench or when you want to move employees somewhere else. Where we have people that we really need, these are, for example, we really don't need them here, we're going to look for places to put them to work, because we cannot afford to move one single Gambian out of job. We cannot afford to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to create avenues where we can move them, like we have seen in other countries where government came out with to help assist employees to create companies, and those the government actually use those companies to give them contracts.
The atmosphere must be conducive.
That's
the private sector in this country is struggling. Yes. You talked about interest rates. Very few business can grow here because of interest rates. You talk about Gambia being, we know Gambia is a tax-based economy.
But that's
the government actually, sort of what we are seeing here, we are taxed every day on everything that we do.
Yes.
How can a company grow? You know, for example, you move people, you lay people off, the private sector cannot cater for them.
No,
the main employer in the Gambia is the public sector.
But the issue we have in this high interest rate, government is also playing a critical role in making the interest rates go up. Simply because when the government has an appetite to borrow, of course, they are competing with the private sector. And that's exactly what is happening. Now, in the financial industry, you are in fact better off to give your money to government, interest bill, for example, and go to sleep, because it's risk. That's exactly what is happening. So when this government appetite actually to borrow, what that means, the rates will go up. Because again, the demand for those loans or the demand for those treasury bills will go up, because the government is actually taking money to develop. When that happens, the interest will go up. And the private sector will also be.
So an NRP government will not have an appetite for borrowing?
We will reduce that appetite for borrowing, because of borrowing. We have been borrowing since independence, and we are not moving, the way we're supposed to move. So we're going to have to put a cap. In fact, one of the things we're going to put is we're going to have a ceiling in borrowing. That's where we put a ceiling, that we cannot bust this ceiling. In fact, even if you want to bust that ceiling, you have to go back to the parliament for the parliament to review whether they will allow the executive to bust that ceiling in terms of taking debts in this government. And NRP-led government will ensure that we have a debt ceiling, that we cannot go beyond this thing. If you have to go beyond that debt ceiling, then you have to go back to the parliament, and parliament will give the approval so that we can move to the next level. We cannot just let it open like that.
Bayo, do you have similar plans like NRP?
No, I differ with him to an extent, because Mr. Sisi made mention of the head count. And when the head count come, I personally was affected, in fact, because I was not in the country when the head count was run. I was working on the the Ministry of Education by then. But before I came, I met my name was already, out of the system.
So you were one of the ghost workers.
Were you not unofficially or officially?
Yeah, official. I was on unofficial mission. But
and then your head
when
was...
I came, my head was not counted.
So you were one of the...
But I was able to regulate. I was able to regulate it later. Okay. It was a malfunction. It was something that happened within the ministry. I don't know what happened. But when I came, I was able to regulate that, and I continue. And that was the trajectory, to retrench people, But one thing that he said that I differ. If you said you want to take people off, let's say in basically the ministries, people who are working there. Because you're talking about reviewing the public civil service. If you say that, if you take out those people, where are you going to put them? That's more productive than where they are. Because when you look at...
you saying they are more productive where they are?
Where they are?
Do you know that?
Because if
Mr. Honorable have just said, when you go to the market, you see people in the market doing their shopping before close of business.
I am talking,
Hardly you go
I am
to
talking about the Gambia Action Party.
I'm
talking about the Gambia Action Party perspective.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. I'm talking about the Gambia Action Party perspective. Yeah. We are not going to have ghost workers. One, we are not going to have people who are not diligent in their working or in their dealings. We're going to have a technocrat. And in that technocrat, everybody in that technocrat must work to expectations. And you are going to be paid based on merit. So he's talking about the minimum wage. For sure, Gambia Action Party is going to set up a minimum wage. Borrowing...
How much? Like how much?
$30,000 is per month.
Wow.
So
because
let's get this and let it go on the record.
Yes. Every Gambian, the minimum salary you can earn in this country, not based on merit, I'm talking about the based on merit per se. 30,000. Now, based on merit, now think
how are you going to define that merit? How are you going to define that
like
merit?
For example, your capacity, maybe your educational, awareness, or let's say you are a director, let's say you are a minister, even if you look at the Gambia pay scale, it's on grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 5, grade 6, grade 12. Is it not so?
So what will be the ceiling? 30,000 for the minimum? And the ceiling?
That's what I said. Based on merit, the ceiling will be unmarginable. Depends on the position that you have. But basically, every Gambian should work home per month. Basically, a minimum salary of $30,000. You know what's the problem of the government here is we've subjected ourselves to dependency. You talk about tax-based economy. Why should we have a tax-based economy? The Gambia has resources.
What are these resources?
We know the Gambia as a nation has resources. Why would you utilize the resources for the
What are these resources?
I want to...
River Gambia is one. It's a resources, which is our logo as a party. River Gambia is one. Look at the contract that is given
to who?
To the European Union. 5 million euros per annum. How can you justify that? Can you extend that with our river? What can you have in the river per year? It's more than that. Way more than that. Look at the Chinese policies that we have with the Chinese.
Could you elaborate?
Look at the Black Sand.
Could you elaborate when you talk about the EU, and our river? What does the EU has to do with our river?
What I'm talking about is the fishing policy they had, which was the 5 million euros per year. That the EU is fishing.
Are you confusing the two, the River Gambia and the High Sea?
I'm talking about the resources. The resources. Yeah. You asked me to name the resources. I said one of the resources we have in this country is River Gambia.
Okay.
And then I also said, why should we give a contract to EU 5 million euros per annum? To fish our rivers.
Now, what will you do with the River Gambia? Knowing you're saying that, okay, it's been given to the EU.
And
what will your party do different?
Well, the River Gambia, first of all, we use it in the agricultural sector, point of irrigation. Because we don't, in our agricultural system right now, it's a rain-dependent agriculture. We don't want to indulge in a rain-dependent agriculture. We want to have a whole year routine of agricultural produce.
How will you do this?
So we create dams. We create dams. And when we create those dams in our state farms, when we create those dams, and the River Gambia will be used to supply water for irrigation.
Who is going to manage the state farms?
The Gambia Action Party is going to have a technocrat that is well responsible to ensure that the state farms are well regulated. So in terms of revenue coming, in terms of the productivity, in terms of the yield that we have per year, all is going to be regulated under the same
whatever one thinks of
umbrella.
Must look at the feasibility of it. Have you guys done any feasibility study to understand if this is feasible in the Gambia?
Of course it is feasible. It just depends on the dedication and
Have you done the study?
No, you don't need to go to do a study on irrigation, on farming. You don't need to go study.
Without a study, you're not going to get the data, you're not going to get the facts. Then you'll just be blindly telling us, we are going to do this, we are going to do this.
If you say we are speculating, for us, we are not speculating. We know that we can do it.
I would say you are speculating because you have not done any feasibility study.
Yes, Honorable Mbow. Yes. You gave the River Gambia to EU. Why will you do that?
The high sea is the high sea.
The fishing district, yeah. Why?
That's exactly where people are actually missing the point.
Yeah.
Those the contract, when you look at it, actually is at the high seas. In fact, those areas, our fishermen, they do not go there. That's exactly where the problem is. People need to understand that. The River Gambia, there's nobody that actually has been licensed in terms of European Union to go in the River Gambia. No. The license that they gave them is on the high seas, where our fishermen they do not go over those areas, and that must be clear. And that's where the people actually having difficult to understand really where the River Gambia is and also where our high seas is. This is exactly why the problem is. They are not going into River Gambia to do any fishing. That is purely on our artisanal fishing that we have, and there's nothing doing about that. Now, coming to the one area that I think my colleague did mention about 30,000 salaries and stuff, that is quite impossible. Because if you understand the figures or the nature of the economy of this country, you know anybody you that understand that you know that that's impossible. If you look at the total revenue that's coming into this country, the government of the Gambia, 40% of it, 30 to 40% of it actually is going to pay debt. Currently. What are they going to do with that? Is that they just come in, they said we're not going to pay any debt? No. Gambia actually has an obligations that they really need to fulfill. And one of these obligations actually, the debts that we actually have. The other obligation also is the employees of the government of the Gambia, which is the civil servants. 10 to 20% of those revenue also is going to pay them. In fact, what is left with here is less than 20% for development. That's what it is. So if you say that you're going to increase everybody's salary by 30,000, that's impossible. Except if God is actually raining money so that we can then pay. But otherwise, that's impossible.
Good. Ali, I just have one more question for this here, for Bayo and Honorable. Yeah. When you talk about poverty, communication is very important. Like the feeder roads are very essential. When you look at the data from last year, it's telling you CRR is considered the poorest.
My area.
Your area.
Exactly.
And road network is very poor. What will your government do in terms of that? And rural poverty, like Honorable have said, we said urban, rural, urban is doing better than rural and stuff. But you can see in the rural, there is no employment, it's all farming. And you see, most of the time when these farmers do when they have their produce, it's in the mercy of the middlemen and tradesmen. They would come there, and then, I mean, during the lean period, if you know what the lean period is, I guess you know, is the time when they say September, October, when there is actually the produce are in there, and they need money, and they will give them this money, and then but it will come at a high interest rate. For example, they will give you for millet a kilo for $7, but in the market at the time of the harvest it's $12. So you are giving me money, and you are buying my produce from me at the time of harvest at $7, but in the market it's $12. That's a complete rip-off. And look at rice. A kilo of rice is $500. At the lean period, they will give you $500 per kilo. But at the time of produce in the market, it's $1,200. So it's a complete rip-off. What would a GAP government do, and what would an NRP government do to at least see our rural men and women in a more productive involvement in terms of the economy to grow, and creating the communication of road network, feeder roads, for example?
Thank you, Mr. Sise. Thanks so much for that wonderful question. It is actually, we're looking at it entirely as a party. What thing that is lacking here is, it is in manner in which our programs and policy are put in place. As a Gambia Action Party government in the making, in fact, what we are anticipating for is this rural-urban migration. We want to cut it off. How are we going to do this? Is to ensure that whatever that is available in the urban areas is available in the rural areas. So that competition, you create that competitive marketing procedure, whereas people don't need to travel all the way from Kian to come and sell their produce, or people don't need to travel all the way from Basse to come here to sell their produce, or to come and find employment. What you need to do is to move the infrastructure from one place to another.
And that's why you want to move the capital from Banjul to Jarasoma.
That's why we want to. Where is the center of Gambia? So you can see it's fascinating, and secondly, it's easier, for everybody to catch up with the capital city. So you don't have to allow people to be moving from one end to another.
We're not talking about moving here. We're talking about our farmers in the rural area that have been exploited by middlemen and tradesmen. That's what I'm saying. What will your government do in stopping the exploitation?
Then I think I made mention of it. It's all about marketing. Like government is not taking ownership of creating the infrastructure for marketing. People we call middlemen, there are people that are just there as parasite, to ensure that whatever they gain from the farmers, they have double of it. These are things that, as a Gambia government, Gambia Action Party government, we're going to stop this. You can see government officials having infrastructure in all over the country, whereas there will be no need for us to even have middlemen. If you're going to have middlemen, the percentage will be minimal. To middle between.
No, you cannot control a middleman what he wants to do with his money.
No, what I'm saying is,
it
depends on the competition. It depends on the competition. If the competition is not viable for you, you leave it. If you know that if I cannot have a farmer who can sell me produce anymore, all the farmers are selling their produce to someone else.
We are talking about the lean period. The lean period at the time when they barely need money, at the time when they barely need food, but there is nothing there for them. And this middleman would come and give them money at a cut price when they get their produce. This is the problem. This has been going on for the last 40 years. So
that's what I'm talking about.
What will your government do practically to stop that?
Okay,
this is my question.
To stop that, in fact, we made mention of this already. We talk about the loan facilities. Government can also indulge in loaning. You create small enterprise in all the villages, whereas people who need money can go and take money. From there, at the end of the day, you can exchange your money with produce at 0% rate.
Where are you going to get this money from?
The Gambia, I told you, Gambia has resources. Why won't you use? In fact, I even want to differ with Honorable Mbu regarding the issue of the $30,000 in minimum wages, because we are dependent. That's why it's finding it difficult. So it's going into record. But if we're going to establish a very working economy, whereas we have our own monies,
when you talk about River Gambia as a resource, you're not going to give that.
I made mention of the Black Sand. I also made mention of the Black Sand. I also made mention of other resources.
But you have to invest into these resources. You have to invest. You are not going to give everybody a cup of River Gambia to drink. No. You're going to invest in that River Gambia. How are you going to do that?
The investment we're going to have in the River Gambia is very simple. It's just like to build the policies with other bilaterals.
You've not done it yet.
All right.
You've not done it yet.
I still not know it.
Thank you, Mr. Baki.
I think with the issue mentioned by Mr. Sise, in terms of like what the farmers face in terms of difficulties during the lean periods, I think I can sum it up on one.
Yes.
One, again, with our farmers, the problem is access to finance. Then you have storage, then you have transportation and also marketing. These are key. And the reason why these feeder routes are important is actually allows the farmers to be able to move their products or their produce from one point to another point. And this is really crucial. If they're unable to do that, they will not be able to have access to those markets. And that's the reason why the middlemen will drive or take their car, take whatever they kind of transportation medium they have, go to them, take it at a very low price, and then come back to the urban areas and then to sell at a higher price. To be able to do that, we must be able to build those feeder roads for them. We must be able to create that market, and above all, we must have storage systems for them, especially women folks. You see, in my area where they do a lot of farming in this thing they call guana, they do plenty of it. But in certain times of the year, actually most of it go to rot. You know why? They don't have any storage facility to be able to do that. And also, to really do value addition also is a problem. So an NRP-led government will ensure that we have storage mechanisms. We also have facilities that will allow them to add value additions to this produce. So that in terms of drying, in terms of packaging, in terms of really bottling them in various means to be able to bring to the urban area.
As a representative of that area, and sitting here and hearing that area is the poorest in the country, yes. How do you feel? I feel bad.
I feel very bad. And that's the reason why when I stand in Parliament, I ensure everybody in this country actually hears about the issues that are affected Upper Salom and Nyanija, because we are neighbors. Yes. You know, I consider myself Upper Salom and Nyanija. And then the good thing about what's happening now is, at least since God created the earth, there's one particular road network that goes through Upper Salom all the way to Nyanija that has never been built since God created earth. And last year, Parliament was able to approve a subsidiary appropriation that the work is going to begin. And that's about 35-kilometer road, and that will touch the lives of more than 30,000 people that we have in that particular area. And this is exactly what we are talking about, to provide network so that people can move from point A to point B. Right now, the work, actually, I think they've already given the advance payment already, and the work needs to begin at this point in time. Also, with that, there are also women vegetable gardens that have been created in Gujarat and also in Fas. And those are the kind of things we need. From there, then you move to the next level in terms of storage. From there, you need to another level called value additions, so that they can put everything there, package it, reproduce them in certain kind of ways and then bring it over here, or even for export. That's exactly what we mean by developing those areas.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mbow. Bayo, I'll come back to you. We know the issue of this poverty has really affected many Gambians, and now the Ramadan is approaching. We have seen the price hike of basic commodities, and many Gambians are really finding it very difficult, to put food on the table, which doesn't affect the politicians. They are affected by this price hike in the market.
It affects us as well. It affects us. We are all part of the society.
Yeah, but then do you think the government is doing much to address this issue of price hike? It appears there's no price control in the market.
Of course, government is not doing anything. Let me not put it in this. Let me not characterize this in this manner that government is not doing anything.
The price control. If you're saying the politicians are not affected, are you telling me the president is affected by this price hike? Are you telling me the ministers are affected? They are not.
But when you say political, it's not only the president or the ministers that are engaging in political issues. I'm a politician. He's a politician. There are much more other people that are politicians. In fact, politics.
But your party leader is not affected by this.
Why is he not affected? He's a Gambian and he's also part of the society. His wife go to the market every day and shop.
Okay, now explain.
So the price hiking is something that has been here. It's just like a continuity that I'm saying. Price control has become a problem in our country. We will never be able to address the issues of price control. And this, I think, government should be able to have a stake in this. Because if not, people will suffer in this country.
Will there be any price control?
Without any price control. Because even if you come to the foreign currency, the way sometimes it's not, if it's like sometimes you hear this, tomorrow you hear that, people just put on their own prices. At the end of the day, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't pay dividend to the development of our state. Government should have a position.
Do you approve of price control? Just to move on to Honorable, do you approve it?
Of course I approve to a price control.
In the Gambia?
Honorable? Yes. Now, in terms of these price hikes that you are talking about, Aliu, I think we must look at the basis or the genesis of what's actually happening. I did mention this in Parliament 2 days ago during our adjournment debate. You see, international world market prices are not controlled by any single country. It's really determined by the forces of demand and supply. So really, what we need to do, if we want to really change that, we need to really start producing these essential commodities in this country here, so that we don't have to depend on the international market. Because international market, we do not control the prices, we do not control the foreign exchange. These are outside the hands of Gambia, the entire country. So to reverse that, we really need to look at our essential commodities and then start to produce them in this country here. Then we will be able to dilute the market. And in fact, if all the countries do the same thing, then that means those prices that we have will actually go down, because of the demand will be low.
Don't you think we need a policy to regulate the environment? Because it appears, you are a businessman. You overrise 6 months ago. Yeah. You have it here already. What will the increase in international market really happen?
Additional to that, yes. Quickly. You talk about women, what they're doing, but we see they don't have land, they don't own land. Exactly. What would an NRP government and a GAP government do for these women who go and toil on this land to have ownership of land, control over the land? Quickly.
And that's the reason why where this thing comes in, like cooperative society. That's exactly where they come in. That's also where we come in. Also, we have public-private partnership. That's also where they come in. Because the thing is, land. Well, in this country, the Gambia, especially the area I live, really. It's not like we have plenty of land, because on this left side of we have is Senegal, and on the right side we have Bolong from the river Gambia. So essentially you will see that we really don't have too much land. But again, when we have cooperative societies, we have people that are not actually using their lands. Why can't we come together and form associations and form societies and work on a particular area of land, and then the dividends, we share those things there?
Thank you. Mr. Bai, we have 40% poverty rate in the country. What will your party do in the short term and long term?
And then follow up on the question 2 on the women ownership.
We're running out of time, Sidi. So this question goes to both of you.
So which one am I going to answer now, right?
Both of them. The 40% poverty rate in the country. What will your party do in the short term and long term? And to the same question to Honorable Mbow. Please summarize it. We're running out of time.
Yes, it's just like I reiterated. Like what I was saying is, like, the government should, as Gambia Action Party in government, what we're going to do is just like to invest in the resources that we have. When we invest in the resources that we have, the poverty is obviously going to be reduced. And then we talk about women allocation for lands. And lands, we have land. We have virgin lands in this country. We have enormous virgin lands in this country. It's just a matter of identifying those lands, giving them to women so that they can farm.
Thank you.
At the end of the day, they can build their own families.
Yes, thank you.
I think number one is we really need to diversify our economy. That's the key thing we have to do, diversify our economy. And instead of moving away from tax-based economy to other areas where the government can generate revenue, we have to make the state-owned enterprises to generate money for this government, so that the government can support the people that are out there that are actually, we call them poor, and bring them up. So investment in the state-owned enterprises, and so they make money, and investment in people, in terms of agriculture, in terms of education, and that would be a priority for NRP.
Well, thank you so much, Honorable Mbow. Well, viewers, with that, we come to the end of this State of Affairs program this week. I was your host, Aliu Sise, with my co-host, Sidi Sise. Our guests tonight were Honorable Alaji Mbow of the National Reconciliation Party and Alaji Mbayo of the Gambia Action Party. Thank you so much for watching this program. You can also watch the repeat on Sunday at 10 a.m. Until then, thank you so much and goodbye.